Armed with a hammer and a screwdriver for protection, a terrified couple hurry to a public telephone. The time, 6 o'clock in the morning. The date, October the 7th, 1965. The place, a Manchester overspilled council estate.
Which service do you require?
Police! There's been a murder. Welcome back to Case Closed. Before we begin, I need to give another massive thank you. Just this week, we have surpassed 1,000 subscribers. This is a huge milestone and would not be possible without all of your continued support. This is a major point in my YouTube career and fills me with so much hope for the future. So once again, thank you. Now, back to the video. Between 1963 and 1968, the north of England was plagued by a crime spree so despicable it almost defies belief. In today's documentary, I will take you through the twisted story of the Moors murders, exploring the minds of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, their horrendous acts, and the impact their heinous crimes had on the wider community. Before we begin, I want to warn you that this video contains some graphic content, such as descriptions of child killings. Do not continue watching if you are easily offended. Ian Brady was born under the name Ian Stewart on the 2nd of January 1938 in Glasgow, Scotland. His mother, Margaret Stewart, was a single waitress. Ian never met his father, but recalled Margaret telling him that he was a reporter who worked for a Glasgow newspaper but had sadly died 3 months before she gave birth. His mother was very poor, and when she was unable to continue funding her and her son's life, she put him into care. Ian moved in with Mary and John Sloan, a couple who Margaret knew for a while. They took good care of the young boy, and his mother regularly visited him so that he never had to feel abandoned. When he was 9 years old, the family moved into a new council house in Pollock. There are many claims that around this time the young boy started to torture and kill animals. However, Brady himself always denied this. Brady was enrolled at Shawlands Academy, a school intended for students with above average abilities. However, this was also when his behaviour took a dramatic turn for the worse. During his teenage years, Brady found himself being summoned to court on 2 separate occasions for housebreaking. He had a girlfriend, but after he discovered that she had attended a dance with another boy, he threatened to kill her with a knife. The relationship then suddenly ended, and Ian continued his life of crime. His criminal activity intensified from there, culminating in a 3rd court appearance, this time facing 9 charges. Although the specifics of these charges remain unclear, they painted a clear picture of a young man spiraling out of control. As his 17th birthday approached, Brady narrowly avoided prison, being placed on probation instead. One of the conditions of this probation required him to live with his mother, who had moved to Manchester by this time, offering him a fresh start in a new city. In Manchester, Margaret had remarried, taking on the name Brady after her new husband, Patrick. Ian adopted his stepfather's surname, symbolising the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Patrick Brady helped the young Ian secure a job at the local market, and for a brief time, it seemed as though Ian was on the path to stability. However, this hope was short-lived. Within a year, Ian was caught stealing lead seals from the market and trying to sneak them out. Because he was still under 18, he was sentenced to 2 years in a borstal, a type of young offenders institution from the time of the British Empire. Whilst incarcerated, Brady was caught brewing alcohol, leading to his transfer to a more notorious unit in Hull, where discipline was far stricter. Brady was released in November 1957 and decided he needed to better himself. He went to the local library and rented some books to help him do just that. He astonished his parents when he locked himself in his room for hours at a time to study. By January 1959, Brady's efforts finally bore fruit when he secured a clerical position at Millward's Merchandising, a chemical distribution company located in Gorton, a tough, working-class area of Manchester. Myra Hindley was born on the 23rd of July 1942 in the same rough Manchester neighbourhood of Gorton. Her father, an aggressive alcoholic, terrorised her household, often unleashing his frustrations on both his wife and children. The family lived in crushing poverty, barely able to scrape together enough to survive. When Myra's younger sister Maureen was born in 1946, the family's finances became even more strained. Unable to care for both girls, Myra's parents sent her to live with her grandmother. Myra's father, an army veteran who had fought in World War II, demanded toughness from his children. He believed in the values of self-reliance and physical strength, which he imposed on Myra at a young age. Determined to mold her into someone who could defend herself, he taught her how to fight. One day, when Myra was around 8 years old, a neighborhood boy scratched her, causing her to run home in tears. When she told her father about the incident, he responded not with comfort, but with a harsh ultimatum. If she did not retaliate, he would beat her himself. Motivated by fear and the desire for her father's approval, Myra found the boy and beat him unconscious. This violent response earned her praise from her father, further cementing the twisted lesson that violence was an acceptable and even commendable means of solving problems. Experts later suggested that Myra's early experiences with her father's brutality deeply shaped her personality. They argued that her unusual relationship with her father brutalized her, and that she was rewarded for violence. This foundation would later play a significant role in the horrific crimes that she would commit. Myra found her first job as a junior clerk for a local engineering firm. She was well liked there, and her colleagues had nothing but positive things to say about her. When she was 17, she briefly became engaged, but called off the wedding when she realized that the unknown young man was too immature for her tastes. It would take a few more years before Myra's and Ian's paths would cross. In January 1961, Myra secured a job at Millward's Merchandising, where Ian Brady had been working already for a couple of years. At first, they barely spoke, but Myra quickly became infatuated with her mysterious colleague. Despite their lack of interaction, she began obsessively writing about him in her diary, captivated by his brooding demeanor and apparent intelligence. After nearly a year of working side by side, Brady finally asked Myra on a date in December. They went to the cinema, though there is some debate over which film they saw. While many sources claim it was Judgment at Nuremberg, a dark legal drama about Nazi war crimes, Myra later insisted that the film was King of Kings, a biblical epic. Given the couple's shared fascination with Nazi ideology, Judgment at Nuremberg sounds like the more likely choice, and maybe it is, though personally I believe Myra that they saw the King of Kings. It just seems way too weird to me that someone would take a girl on a first date to watch a movie about Nazis. It definitely does fit in with their future activities though. Their relationship quickly intensified. The pair often went to the cinema together, returning afterward to Myra's house, where they drank wine and discussed their shared interests. Brady eventually introduced Myra to his disturbing collection of Nazi literature and memoirs, which she eagerly devoured. Soon, the couple began reading these books to each other during their breaks at work, immersing themselves in a dark, twisted worldview. It was around this time that Myra began bleaching her hair blonde in an attempt to look more like the perfect Aryan. The couple also began to rent vans, which they would sit inside of and plan bank robberies, which they were probably inspired to do by the infamous American criminal couple Bonnie and Clyde. Driven by their fantasies, Myra joined a rifle club, where she was taught about firearms and how to shoot them. She eventually acquired a Webley 45 and a Smith & Wesson 38, weapons that the couple planned to use during the robberies. However, despite all of their plotting, the plans to rob banks never materialized. In the June of 1963, Brady moved in with Myra at her grandmother's house, and by July, the couple had begun to discuss how to commit the perfect murder. Brady seemed to have become infatuated with a book called Compulsion by Maya Levine. The story is about two young men who attempt to commit the perfect murder of a 12-year-old boy, but are caught. They ended up escaping the death penalty because of their age. This seemed to inspire the pair to commit their first murder, and on the 12th, they set out to do just that. Brady wanted to kill a child, but Myra dissuaded him, convincing him that a teenager would be a better target. She said that there would be less attention to the disappearance of a teenager versus a child. The following part of this script is based off of Myra's statements, which differ slightly from Brady's. I will point out the differences to you. Brady told Myra to borrow a van and drive around the local area. He would follow close behind on his motorbike until they found the perfect victim. When he spotted someone, he would flash the headlights of his bike as a signal for Myra to stop. Eventually, they came across a young girl, and Brady gave the signal. 16-year-old Pauline Reade was walking alone on her way to a dance class when Myra pulled up alongside her. The pair were acquaintances, since Pauline went to school with Myra's younger sister, Maureen. Myra offered the young girl a lift to her class, and Pauline got inside of the van. When she was inside, Myra asked her to help search the nearby Saddleworth Moor for an expensive glove that she had lost, and Pauline agreed. The pair drove to the moor, and Brady followed behind. Myra told Pauline that Brady would also be helping with the search. As they arrived, Pauline exited the van and Myra stayed behind. Brady then led the 16-year-old out into the moor before viciously attacking her. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned to Myra and then led her to where Pauline lay dying. She had 2 vicious cuts across her throat and a 4-inch deep incision in her voice box. Myra then asked Brady if he essayed Pauline, to which he replied, "Of course I did." This sadly happened to almost all of the couple's victims, both girls and boys, so for monetization's sake, I will no longer mention it. Please just assume that it happened. Brady then returned to the van to retrieve a shovel that he had stashed nearby, leaving Myra alone with the dying girl. When he came back, Myra returned to the van, leaving Brady to bury the girl alone. Brady's account was almost the same as this, however, it differed when he stated that Myra was not only present for the murder, but that she also participated in every part of it. A few months would pass, and on November 23rd, 1963, the couple visited a busy local market. Amongst the stalls and crowds, they happened to come across 12-year-old John Kilbride. His innocent appearance and vulnerability caught their attention, and they saw their next victim. Approaching the boy, they offered him a bottle of sherry and a ride home. Once inside the car, the couple charmed the boy with small talk before suggesting that he may help them search for a lost glove on the moors, the same deception that they had used on their first victim. The trio drove to Saddleworth Moor, the same desolate, windswept location where Pauline Reade had met her grim ending just a few months earlier. Brady led John away from the car, telling the boy that he would show him the search area. Myra supposedly waited behind, knowing full well what was about to unfold. As they ventured deeper into the empty moorland, Brady suddenly attacked the unsuspecting boy, attempting to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade, a weapon that he had likely chosen to maximize suffering. However, when the blade proved unsuitable for the horrific task, Brady resorted to a different method. Grabbing a shoelace, he strangled the young John, taking pleasure in watching the life fade from the bleeding child's eyes. His life was snuffed out in an instant of unimaginable terror. After the act, Brady buried John's small, lifeless body in a shallow grave. Once he was done, he called Myra over, and in an act of sickening pride, Myra posed for a photo on the burial site with her pet dog. I cannot find many details regarding the next victim, but I will do my best to be thorough. On the evening of the 16th of June 1964, Myra came across a 12-year-old boy named Keith Bennett as he was walking to his grandmother's house. She asked him for help loading some boxes into her van and then offered him a lift home in exchange. The boy obliged. Once inside the van, Keith looked back and saw Brady, who didn't say a word. Myra used the same old story, mentioning the lost glove as an excuse to lure him out onto the moor. When they arrived, Myra pulled over in a secluded lay-by, far from any prying eyes. Brady then exited the van, beckoning for Keith to follow, before walking off into the distance and vanishing from Myra's sight. After about 30 minutes, Brady returned alone, his face expressionless. Myra asked him what he had done, and he told her that he had strangled the 12-year-old with a piece of string, an act that was quickly becoming his MO. Keith's body would never be found. On the 24th of December 1964, Christmas Eve, the killer couple would claim another young life. That evening, the streets of Manchester were full of families hurrying around, preparing for the next day. Myra and Brady visited a local fun fair in search of their next victim. It didn't take long before they spotted little Lesley, who seemed to be alone. They immediately devised a plan, deliberately dropping some shopping bags in front of her, and then asked the 10-year-old for her help to pick them up and carry them to the car. Lesley, unaware of the danger, kindly agreed to provide them with her assistance. Once they had lured her back to their car, they forced her inside before quickly driving back to their new home. By this time, the couple had moved out of Myra's grandmother's home and now had their own place. What happened next was by far the worst murder of all. Inside the privacy of their home, the couple began tormenting the young girl in a truly sadistic manner. Forced to undress, the terrified child was then gagged and made to pose for a series of disturbing photographs, the couple taking pleasure in documenting her fear and humiliation. Brady and Hindley, devoid of any empathy, then ended her life by strangling her with a piece of string, the same one that had claimed the lives of other victims before her. To make matters worse, this appalling crime was recorded on an audio tape, with Lesley's agonizing screams and desperate pleas for her life echoing as a haunting reminder of her suffering. Both Brady and Myra's voices can be heard on the tape, their cold, remorseless commands drowning out little Lesley's cries for mercy. In later statements, Myra tried to distance herself from the murder, claiming that she had gone to run a bath and returned only to find the child already dead. Brady, however, shifted the blame back onto her, stating that it was actually Myra who had delivered the final blow. I personally believe Brady here, since he admitted to ending all of the other victims' lives. I don't see why he would blame Myra for only one of the killings, but none of the others. Regardless of who physically ended Lesley's life, both were equally complicit in her torture and murder. The following morning, they drove up to the moor once again and buried her small body in a shallow grave, adding another innocent child to their growing graveyard. Almost a full year would pass before they would strike again. On the cold and dark evening of October 6th, 1965, Myra drove Brady to the busy Manchester Central Railway station. The train station, filled with large crowds of travellers, provided the perfect hunting ground. Brady scoured the faces of the crowd, looking for someone that he believed he could easily manipulate. After just a few minutes, he returned to the car with 17-year-old Edward Evans, an apprentice engineer. Poor Evans had no idea that he had just put his life into the hands of a monster. The three of them then drove back to Myra and Brady's home to share a bottle of wine. This was by far the pair's oldest victim, and I assume that they offered him a drink because they were worried that he might be able to put up a fight. They laughed and joked with Evans, which is actually extremely sinister if you really think about it. Imagine sitting with someone, cracking jokes, asking them about themselves, learning all about them, the whole time having every intention of ending this person's life. It's seriously twisted stuff. At this point, Myra's younger sister, Maureen, had married a young man named David Smith, a figure who would soon become integral to the unravelling of their child-killing spree. Over the previous few months, Brady and Smith had formed a friendship, and Smith looked up to Brady as a kind of role model. Myra supposedly disapproved of this friendship because she was worried that Brady might try to kill Smith. I'm not sure if she was worried because she cared for Smith, or if it was something more selfish. It's very possible that she only cared since Smith was too close to home and they were likely to be investigated should something happen to him. Whether these were Myra's true feelings or just another lie, when Brady ordered her to fetch her brother-in-law, she followed that order without question. It seems the killer couple had actually planned for something like this. When Myra invited Smith over, she told him that he first had to wait outside for a signal before he was allowed to enter the building. This signal would be a flashing light. I assume that this must have confused him. Maybe he was even expecting some kind of pleasant surprise when he entered. There's no way that David could have predicted what he was about to witness. Eventually the signal came and David knocked. Brady invited him inside and then left him in the kitchen. telling him that he was going to collect the wine. Suddenly, David heard a blood-curdling scream, something like a horror movie, only much worse. And then, the screams didn't stop. They came again and again, each one more frantic than the last. Then, in a moment that would haunt him forever, Smith heard Myra's voice over the top of Evan's cries. "Dave, help him." David, who by now was almost paralyzed with fear, suddenly snapped out of it and rushed into the living room. What he saw there was nothing short of a nightmare brought to life. Brady was in the midst of a savage attack, wielding an axe with brutal force as he struck Edward Evans repeatedly. Blood spattered the walls as Brady continued his violent assault, eventually switching to a different method and strangling Evans with an electrical cord. The act was beyond cold-blooded. It was a display of true evil. Brady had sprained his ankle during the frenzied attack, and with the lifeless body of Evans proving too difficult for him to handle alone, he forced David to assist. Together, they wrapped the young man's body in plastic sheeting. They then stored the body in the spare room, intending to dispose of it the next day on the same desolate moorland that had already become a graveyard for their victims. Smith, now an unwilling accomplice, agreed to return the following morning with a pram to help transport the body to the car and ultimately to its final resting place on the moor. Shaken to his core, David finally left the killer couple's residence and returned to his own home at around 3 a.m.
By implicating him in the murder, Brady's intention was to gain control over Smith.
Brady and Hindley tried to coerce David Smith into being involved in the murder of Edward Evans, and they misjudged the whole scenario. They really thought they were going to get a hold on Smith, and it didn't happen.
His body and mind was overwhelmed with shock, and he vomited into the kitchen sink, struggling to comprehend the monstrous act that he had just witnessed. Trembling, he confided in his wife, Maureen, telling her what had just transpired at her sister's home that night. For hours, they just sat together, right up until the first light of dawn broke through the window. At 6:10 a.m, as the sun finally began to rise, Smith, who was terrified that Brady might be watching him, armed himself with a knife and a screwdriver. He took these weapons for protection, knowing the danger he faced if Brady suspected him of betrayal. With his heart pounding in his chest, he made his way to a phone box on the estate. There, he called the police, recounting the horrific events of the previous night. A police car came and picked David up and took him to the police station. Officers wasted no time. Brady was swiftly arrested, but in a surprising move, Myra was not immediately taken into custody. At first, the authorities believed that she may have been an innocent bystander. However, as they delved deeper into the case, the officers quickly grew suspicious of her also. The evidence began to point not only to her involvement in the murder of Edward Evans, but also to the possibility that she had played a key role in other killings too. On October the 11th, after further investigation, Myra was also arrested and taken into custody. What followed was a painstaking year-long investigation during which the police meticulously gathered evidence. They knew that the public outrage over the case was immense, and they would need an airtight case to bring the pair to justice. In fact, the outrage was so immense that the dock inside the courtroom was fitted with bulletproof glass, a measure to protect Myra and Brady from those who might seek their own brand of vigilante justice. The trial was infamous before it even began. every hotel room in Manchester was booked, with journalists flooding to the city to cover the case. The press and the public alike were hungry for every detail, eager to see the monsters behind the crimes held accountable. Each day, massive crowds gathered outside the courthouse, hoping to catch a glimpse of the proceedings. Inside the courtroom, tensions were high as both Brady and Hindley entered their pleas of not guilty. Their emotionless faces only served to fuel the public's already overflowing hatred. Their pleas meant nothing, however, because evidence against them was irrefutable. Among the most damning pieces of evidence were the photographs and audio recordings of little Lesley's final moments. When the tape was played for the court, the entire room was filled with the sound of her desperate cries and pleas for mercy, and an air of utter disbelief filled the room. The voices of both Brady and Hindley could be heard on the tape, making their involvement undeniable. Additionally, David Smith's witness statement painted a vivid picture of the horrifying events that he had also witnessed. After just 2 hours of deliberation, on May the 6th, the jury returned with their verdict. Brady was found guilty of all charges, and Hindley was found guilty of the murders of Lesley Downey and Edward Evans. The death sentence had been abolished in Britain only 6 months earlier, so the judge was left with no choice but to sentence the pair to the new highest sentence possible, life imprisonment. Brady was given 3 life sentences to run concurrently, and Myra was given 2. The pair were sent to separate prisons where, despite their physical separation, they maintained contact through letters for over 6 years. However, in 1971, Hindley decided to break off their relationship and eventually launched an appeal for her release, which was swiftly rejected. She claimed to be a changed woman, hoping to convince the world that she had been rehabilitated. Myra remained incarcerated for the rest of her life. Brady, on the other hand, openly stated that he had no desire to be released and showed no remorse for his heinous crimes. Myra Hindley eventually died behind bars in the year 2002, succumbing to respiratory failure. Brady outlived her by 15 years and eventually passed away in the year 2017. Okay guys, this one's kind of a darker one, so I just want to thank you for watching it to the very end. I also want to once again thank everyone for helping us get to 1,000 subscribers. This is crazy. So yeah, that's a deep thank you. If you want to help the channel grow even more, remember to like and comment. It really does push the video out to a lot more people. And other than that, I hope you have a good day. I will see you all next time.